Good morning, Life Church Buffalo. How are you? Oh, can we try that again? Good morning, Life Church Buffalo. How are you? All right. So, I like to have interaction. And today, as we go through the message, feel free to respond. Okay? Feel free to be interactive. I love a two-way street. So here we are, Independence Day weekend, right? As Carol so wonderfully pointed out, it's great to be in America. It's great because we are independent, right? I often think this weekend about our relationship with God in being independent. And sometimes, I think about those who don't know the Lord, and I think, they really are independent from God. And then I wonder in my own walk with the Lord, are there times where I'm being independent from God? And so before we get into the message today, I just want to talk real quickly about three different types of relationships. One is the independent one, away from God. And if you think about this, we have this in our lives too, maybe with our spouses or our friends or some of our family members, where we're just independent. Particularly us control freaks like to be independent. We like to decide everything. We are autonomous. We want to maintain total control. Right? Come on now, I know some of you know what I'm talking about. Okay? I know. Knock, knock. Control freak. Maybe say control freak who? Did you get it? See? Okay, so I want to encourage you this morning to think a little bit about something differently. And the last time I spoke, I put up a slide about the Erie Basin Marina. And I said, when you change the things you look at, the things you look at change. And so this morning, as we think about these relationships and how we interact with God and how God interacts with us, and how we interact with each other, I want you to consider changing the way you have traditionally looked at it. And perhaps the things you look at will change in a good way. Okay? And we pointed out that when you look at this, you first see the Erie Basin Marina and the wonderful Queen City of Buffalo behind it, which is doing wonderfully right now. Recently voted the #1 city in America to visit. How about that, huh? Come on. Some of us don't even really take that in. We just don't believe it. We've been downtrodden for so many years, we don't believe it. But trust me, the city's awesome. But really, that Erie Basin Marina is shaped in the shape of a buffalo by design. And we miss that sometimes. So when you change the things you look at, the things you look at change. And so rather than looking at this independent relationship as we celebrate Independence Day as a nation, I want to challenge you that in your relationship with God, to think about more of a dependent relationship. Because that's what we say when we become Christians. Depend on God. I don't know about you, but that's pretty hard sometimes. Pretty hard. Because we want to be independent. And we hear the phrase, let go and let God. Right? Let go and let God. And so, be dependent on God. And I even want to change your thinking there. I want to challenge you this morning to consider a relationship that God loves you more than wanting a dependent relationship out of you. Folks, God loves you so much, He does not want you to just be solely dependent on Him. He wants an interdependent relationship with us. Pastor Craig has so wonderfully pointed this out in recent weeks. If you haven't caught it, I have. And I'm going to give it to you. Ready? He wants a partnership with us. Wrap your brain around that for a second, and then see if your heart doesn't tag along. Jesus wants a partnership with us. And so this is what I want us to consider as we drill down on what Pastor Pete has begun to talk about in his series, of which I'm going to continue this morning with you, called Where is God? Where is God? And if we're supposed to have an interdependent relationship with God, we would think our communication with God would be a two-way street, right? A little back and forth. A little I pray to God, maybe God speaks to me. Maybe I pray to God, He speaks to me. I don't know about you folks, but sometimes when I pray, I get nothing. Silence. Nothing. We're going through a hard time. Lord, help me, please. Nothing. Silence. You know, silence is powerful. It's powerful. I'm in the sales business, and I don't like to say that because really what I do is I serve my clients, not sell them. But one of the things that I learned is that when you ask a question, you need to shut up. You need yourself to be silent. And what I've learned is that as I've practiced that over the years, no more than 7 seconds will go by before I elicit any type of response. And it's not the response I want, it's a response, so I know how to serve. But if I keep talking, I don't get it. So I use silence. Have some of you used silence in your relationships? Come on now. Some of you marriages, you get into a little tiff and you shut down. Come on now. Come on. Raise your hand. Come on. You're all liars. Liars. You know you do it. It's referred to as the silent treatment. Okay? The silent treatment. It's powerful. It's powerful. You know, I sometimes feel like God's given me the stiff arm and the silent treatment. Where is God? Where is He? I feel like sometimes like Adele. Hello? Right now my wife's saying, don't do that again. You know, I think as we get through this message, you're going to see that sometimes God may seem silent, but He's not. And you know, have you ever fallen asleep praying? You know? I wonder sometimes, you know, when I'm praying, has God fallen asleep on me? Because I don't hear anything. I don't even hear snoring. You're like, hello? You know, I want to encourage us, if you're in that place, to listen to a guy who was struggling. And the psalmist wrote this in Psalm 121, verses 1 through 4. I will lift up my eyes to the hills, from whence comes my help. My help comes from the Lord, who made heaven and earth. He will not allow your foot to be moved. He who keeps you will not slumber. Behold, he who keeps Israel shall neither slumber nor sleep. God does not sleep on us, folks. God does not give us the silent treatment. We might think that way, but when we change the things we look at, the things we look at change. when we get into a real interdependent relationship with God, we will realize that God is not giving us the silent treatment. So if you're struggling today, and you're wondering, why hasn't God answered my prayers? Stick with me. If you're in a tough financial position, and you're praying for the Lord to bestow blessing on you, and it hasn't come, stick with me. If you're hoping to maybe have a child and you've been praying and it hasn't been happening, stick with me. I've got a word for you this morning. If you are trying to sell your house and it's not selling, well, that you might have the wrong realtor. I had to. Folks, God is not giving you silent treatment. Okay? He's not. And there was a teenager, about 17 years of age, who I think felt like God was giving him the silent treatment. And there's a story about him in the Bible. His name is Joseph. Okay? And Joseph, he was this, can I give you just kind of tell you about his life? It's going to take about 5 minutes. Is that be okay? Hello? Yes. I'm not getting silent treatment, right? All right. Okay, so here's the story of Joseph. He's 17. He's got 10 older brothers. Okay? I know it's tough for us to relate to. But 10 older brothers. And he's the 11th of 12. So he's kind of the baby. All right? Now, you know what happens here, folks, is when you're that, down that far in the lineage of one generation, you kind of can do what you want. You get treated a little differently than the first and second born did. Okay? And by that time, the parents, they maybe didn't care. That was the little baby. Give him this, give him that, let him do this, let him do that, right? They weren't so critical and so hard on him. And his older brothers didn't like that. And, his father, Jacob, kind of favored him. Gave him this special coat of many colors, right? And he was privileged. And Joseph, God was speaking to him. He was speaking to him at this time. Young kid, right? And he was speaking to him mostly in dreams. Joseph had this dream, and his brothers kept picking on him. They're like, dude, why do you get favored so much all the time? They would pick on him like older brothers can do. And I know, because I'm the youngest brother. Man, he had this dream that God was going to lift him up and that he was going to be the ruler of a great nation and that someday his brothers would bow to him and he would be in charge, right? So you know what he did with his dream? He went and he told his brothers, hey, I had this dream, this was going to happen. How do you think that worked out? Let me tell you, that didn't work out too good, right? It did not work out too good at all. So Joseph's brothers one day are way out in a distant field, and Jacob, his father, says to Joseph, hey, go out and get your brothers. They're out on the far east field or far west field or whatever it was out there. So Joseph treks along and he goes. His brothers all of a sudden, they see him in the distance, and Joseph's calling, hey guys! And his brothers said, is that Joseph? Yeah, that's him. Man, I can't stand this kid. What is it with this dude? It's this guy, man, let's just take him out. Let's just kill him. Let's get rid of this kid. We're being out here, nobody's gonna know. I'm so tired of this kid. Dad just, favors him. It's ridiculous. So Joseph comes up and he thinks he's gonna be the first. Hey guys, yeah, Dad wanted me to get you, And they grab him. And they start dragging him away. And they pull his coat off and they stick him down into a well, into a pit. They're like, guys, what are you doing? What are you doing? Wait, no, don't do this. And they stick him down there. And he's down in the pit. Let me ask you a question. Do you think Joseph prayed to God when he was down in the pit? Yeah, I think so. I think so. But all he got was silence. And then one of the brothers says, hey, wait a minute. Why are we going to kill him? There's some Ishmaelites coming up the road right now. We could sell him off and get some money out of this. He'll be taken off to Egypt or somewhere else, and he'll just be gone missing. We'll make some money. So they go ahead and they put the rope down there. Now, what do you think Joseph's thinking? Ah, God, you're answering my prayers. Oh, yeah, thank you. He climbs up out of the pit, and they grab him, and they take him, and they give him to the Ishmaelites, and the Ishmaelites start grabbing him, and they take him, and they're dragging him in shackles through the desert. Now, let me ask you a question. Do you think at that point Joseph prayed to God?
Yes.
Silence. And so they get to Egypt, and they put him on the block. I wish this thing was, I could stand on. Here we go, ready? They put him on the block. And he's all tied up. And he's on the block to be sold. He's going to be sold. And when he's on that block, you think he's praying? Silence. They start bidding on him. They start bidding on him. And this guy Potiphar, he wins. He wins the auction. And Potiphar pays 20 shekels for him. That's it. 20 shekels. Okay? A pile of silver. And they drag him off to Egypt and put him in Potiphar's house as a slave. Now he's a slave for life. Now here he is. He's in a distant land. He's a different language. Doesn't know the language. Doesn't know anybody. This was the little kid at 17 who had the coat of many colors, and he was the privileged one. And he gets put into a pit. He gets dragged out and sold. He gets sold into slavery at Potiphar's house, and he's in this place. Now let me ask you a question. Do you think Joseph prayed at that point?
Yes.
Silence. Then one day, he dealt with it, by the way. He dealt with it pretty well. In fact, he worked himself up to vice president of the slaves. He was the vice president of the slaves. He was number 2 in the household of Potiphar, who was in very good situation. Okay? Number 2. And then one day, Potiphar's wife, she must have been a hottie or something. She comes in, sees Joseph. She finally gets him alone. Now, Joseph, he was a young stud, okay? This guy, he was something to have, right? So Potiphar's wife gets him alone and comes on to him. And let me ask you a question. Do you think Joseph started to pray at that point?
Yes.
The very God who was silent with him when he was in the bottom of the pit, when he was being dragged across the desert, when he was on the selling block to get sold into slavery for the rest of his life in a foreign land with a language he didn't understand and nobody he knew, he decides to honor his God still. And he flees. And he runs away. The only thing is, he forgot his coat. That's a problem. Because now Potiphar's wife decides to spin it. Okay? And this was not a no-spin zone. This is something that Potiphar's wife took and went back to Potiphar and said, look, this kid came on to me, and he abused me, and he raped me. And so they put him in prison. Now let me ask you a question. You think Joseph prayed when he got to prison?
Yeah.
So it sounds like God's not really listening. God's giving him the old stiff arm, right? And he's in prison. about you, but if I was that faithful and I was honoring my Lord after I was sold into slavery and pretty much thrown into the bottom of a pit and dragged across the desert and then framed for rape and put in prison, I'm not so sure I would be praying out to God anymore. And if it was, it would be like, you don't even want to know. I mean, come on. This guy was at a place, now he's in prison. And all of a sudden, a little while later, and I'm saying a little while, this isn't a couple of days, it's probably years later, okay? The Pharaoh, the king, gets upset with a couple of his staff. He sends them in prison for a few years. A cupbearer and a baker. And they have these dreams, and they're talking about their dreams. And Joseph says, wait a minute, I know a little something about dreams. And so they say, you do. So they tell him, and he's, yeah, this is what your dream means. And he looked at the baker and he said, I'm not so sure you want me to tell you what your dream's about, because in about 3 days you're going to get your head chopped off, and that's your story. But you, the cupbearer, you're going to get restored to a place in the kingdom again. So just be patient, it's coming. He said, but wait. Please. I told you what the dreams meant. Do me a favor, please. When you get restored, please tell the king that I don't deserve to be here. I didn't do anything. I did nothing wrong. Please remember me. Tell him about me. I shouldn't be here. So he says, oh, absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you. I will tell the king. I will tell him. And so a few days go by, and cupbearer goes back, and he doesn't tell the king. Now, let me ask you a question. At that point, do you think that Joseph was still praying?
Yeah.
Do you think that Joseph was thinking that God was going to finally meet him? That God was going to finally save him from this predicament that just kept happening over and over and over and over again? Well, it did. It did. 2 years went by. That's not my fault, that's Logan's. Love you, Logan. 2 years went by before anything happened. And the king, Pharaoh, started having a dream. And he didn't know what it was. And they're talking, and the cupbearer had gotten restored to such high level on the staff that he was in the inner circle of hearing this. And he said, whoa, wait a minute. Oh my gosh, I know somebody that knows something about dreams. That guy Joseph down in the prison, he told me that I was going to get restored, and this guy knows what he's talking about. So they go and they get Joseph, and they clean him up, and they bring him before the Pharaoh, they bring him before the king, and he comes up, and he says, here's my dream, how do you interpret it? He says, well, I'll tell you, you're going to have 7 years of harvest, and it's going to be plentiful. It's going to be overwhelming, and you're going to be bestowed with blessing upon blessing. But then right after that, you're going to have 7 years of famine. So, this is kind of what Joseph did. He was confident, or sometimes he was a little bit naive, and he didn't realize before the king, he got a little bold, and he was like, he said, but here's what I think you should do. I think you should find somebody who's really, really good at managing all of the blessings. and that way, each year when the blessings come in, they can hold back 20%. And so when the famine comes, we can get through it. We can get through it. So the Pharaoh in Genesis 41 Pharaoh says to Joseph, "Inasmuch as God has shown you all of this, there is no one as discerning and wise as you. You shall be over my house, and all my people shall be ruled according to your word. Only in regard to the throne will I be greater than you." God finally listened. He finally listened. And I don't know about you, but as you are going through your struggles, you might seem like you're in a season of silence. But really what's going on is God is putting you in a season of preparation. A season of staging. Now let me put it this way. You ever been to a play? You have Act 1, then you have intermission, and Act 2, right? You guys know what this is, right? The Holly Bible? Right? Oh, I'm sorry. Holy Bible, right? The Bible, right? And the Bible actually is written like a play. It really is. And so it's written in 2 acts. The first act is called the Old Testament. And so the second act is called the New Testament, right? Okay? And then, but where's the intermission? The intermission's right here. It's between the Old Testament and the New Testament, between the first act and the second act. There's the intermission. See, right here, guys. That's the blank page. If you look in your Holly Bible between the two, you'll see it too. Okay? There's an intermission that happens. And when you're at a play and the Act 1 ends, the curtain closes. And although you can't see what's going on behind the stage, there is something going on. There's a restaging in preparation for Act 2. And you see, Joseph began to realize this in his seasons of silence. And he remained faithful, forging his faith forward to allow God to prepare him and work in him in a way that he was ready to rule the kingdom. Okay? So I'm telling you, folks, when you're in your season of silence, remain faithful. God is not silent. And so when I realized this, I was bammed with something that I want to bam you with. Can I do that? Yes. That wasn't emphatic enough for me. Can I do that? Yes. All right, you ready to be bammed? Yes. All right, here it is. Ready? Don't mistake God's silence for his absence. Do not mistake his silence for his absence. God is never absent. Amen. He's never absent. Now, there's a lot of things that happen on this blank page. And so now is the time in the service where we switch away from the sermon and we get into a history lesson. I tricked you all. So, who wants to hear history right now? Too bad. You're in church and I got the mic, so you're going to hear it. You ready? Allow me to go through this, because you're going to learn 4 things as we go through this little history lesson. And listen, if you're here and you're not a Christian and you don't believe in the Bible, that's okay. That's okay, because what I'm going to go over right now, it's not even in the Bible. It's factual, historical truth. So you have to believe it. It's fact. It's fact. Okay? So it's totally okay. So when Malachi, the last word of the Old Testament, the ending of Act 1, was written by Malachi. Malachi's a prophet. Now, a prophet is someone who God spoke to, and then he spoke to the people. And that's how God talked to people. That's how God communicated, through the prophets, right? And so when Malachi put his pen down, for the last time, God's people did not hear from him. 400 years plus. So when you're not hearing from God, remember, don't mistake that silence for his absence. Because what I'm about to go through with you is something that hopefully will encourage you to realize this truth. Now, in about 430 BC, there was this guy called Philip of Macedon. And he was a pretty radical dude at the time. And they were being ruled by the Persians. The Persians really ruled this large territory. They were the main rulers of the planet. Okay? And so Philip of Macedon, being a Greek, Macedon, by the way, Macedonia is in the area where now Greece is. Okay? This is where Greece is. So what he did is he united all of the Greek islands and all of the territory, and he united them into one area. Okay? And you might not remember Philip of Macedon. I understand. Okay? We can forget history. But his son, you probably remember. You probably remember. His son was probably the greatest military leader ever. Arguably ever. And his name was Alexander the Great. And Alexander the Great, at 20 years old, organized the Grecian army to take over the Persians and grow the Grecian land. Okay? At 20 years old. This dude was radical. He knew his stuff. But he had a couple demons, He had a couple demons because by the age 33, he died. What they say is from too much drinking. Okay? So he died. But he did one thing that impacts all of our lives today.